Good morning, dear colleagues. Welcome to our reality check on the implementation of Horizon Europe. We are here today in this webinar format to listen to your views, to your experience, to your wishes, to your suggestions on how we can make access to Horizon Europe, but in particular then the implementation, the running of Horizon Europe easier, simpler, better to use. That is an initiative of the Commission where all Directorates General in the Commission are running these reality checks. We would like to know how our policies and programs are implemented, how they are running, what the client experience is, how we can make the implementation better today and in the years to come, but also for the next framework period. Before getting into the reality check today, I would like to bridge back to last week. We had with our Commissioner Zaharyeva, an implementation dialogue attended by more than 1,000 participants to speak a little bit at a higher level, at a political level, exactly also about implementation. We looked at application phase, evaluation phase, and the use of lump sums. And that was done with a great diversity of participants, universities, research institutes, industries, startups, SMEs. What is interesting there is that on the one hand, there were some subject matters where colleagues were easy to agree. Everybody wants less prescriptive calls. Everybody is happy to have more and better feedback from evaluation. But then again, there are different camps. There are some who prefer two-stage calls, others are happy with one-stage calls. Lump sums, there are many, and we know in particular newcomers, startups like lump sums, but there are also others who are very well used to the actual cost system and who prefer to stay with that. For us, it is not easy to tailor how we implement to the taste of everyone, and all the more in a situation where, in a way, we have collaborative research, we have consortia that can and should be a mix of different types, from universities to maybe startups. So that is even more of a reason for us to have something where we can drill deeper. So in a way, from implementation dialogue, more high level, taking the temperature from you, going into reality checks where we can go deeper into subjects where we are listening to you. Today we will also have 5 high-level speakers with us who will comment and debate between themselves. Before I hand over to my colleagues, I would also like to emphasize that our Commissioner is very committed to the case of simplification. She wants as much as possible simplify things that can be simplified now, or also experiment with things that we can try out now in order to bring into action when we start the next MFF as from 28. One thing that should make life a bit easier, that should make access to Horizon Europe easier, is of course our new mobile app that we have launched last week, EU Funding and Me. If you type in Android, Google or Apple App Store, EU Funding, you will see immediately it is there. Please try out really access to EU funding, not only Horizon Europe, all directly managed EU programs can be accessed there, are at your fingertips. You can personalize alerts, notifications, bookmarks. You can look for help. You can contact project officers directly. We are speaking about events, and where you leave off in the metro, on the tram, you can pick it up again when you come to the office or from home and look at the EU funding and tenders portal. Let us know what you think, but it really should help making access to the program also for newcomers much easier. So the reality check today, that is for maybe the next 2 hours, highly interactive. It is virtual only, and we have more than 800 participants today. Thank you for that already. And I would hand over in a moment to my colleague Peter Hartwich, head of unit, and Ulrich Genschel, both of them colleagues of mine in the Common Implementation Center. You know, we are a directorate in DG RTD, and we are framing, we are shaping, we are enabling the implementation of Horizon Europe. So we will also use a Slido to harvest really your comments and suggestions, and all of that will be evaluated. We are going to publish a report with the results of the implementation dialogue last week, and then the reality check today. My name is Matthias Will. Thank you very much for your attention and for your kind attention. Goodbye.
Thank you very much, Matthias, for this introduction. Before we go into the real discussion, I want to say a few words about the organization of this webinar and how this reality check should work today. So you have received a confirmation email explaining a bit how it would work, but just to remind everybody, it will be based basically in 3 sections. In the first section, we will have 5 very distinguished panel members, researchers and innovators with a lot of experience in participating in Horizon Europe, also in the different sections of Horizon Europe. So we have panelists having experience with the European Research Council. Others were also active or are active in the European Innovation Council. And of course, there is lots of experience gathered on the collaborative grants in our so-called Pillar 2. These 5 panelists will first, in the first round, give us their opinion and their suggestions on how the implementation can be improved and simplified. So we will give the floor to each of them one after the other. And then we will have a discussion between them and with them within the panel. And finally, we will of course open the floor to everybody, to all the colleagues concerned and linked and connected to us via the remote connection and via the YouTube stream. And for getting you in, as Matthias mentioned, we have opened already Slido. And when you go to slido.com, you have to type in the code of today's webinar, which is simply Horizon. And then you can start immediately putting in your suggestions. I would encourage you to make your suggestions and proposals for improvement as concrete as possible. So we do not consider it today as a questions and answer session, but rather a session where you can make suggestions for improvements. So the Slido session is open. You can start going there and start putting in your concrete suggestions. And we see already that a few of you started actually doing this. After these remarks on the logistics, I would still spare a few words about our efforts and what happened recently on the improvement of implementation and on the simplification. So as you might have noticed, we are really engaged in discussing this with you, with the stakeholders, with the people actually concerned, participating in our grants since quite a number of years. We are now approaching the final years of Horizon Europe, and we will soon look towards the next program. And we think this is a good moment to come back again and think about what we can further improve for the future. We all know that Horizon Europe is a big program and a complex program. It covers many different areas. many different policy goals, many different actors from PhD students to big multinational consortia, SMEs, startups, and so on. So there is, in a certain sense, natural complexity, but this is what we need to manage in the best possible way. Just to illustrate how big the thing is, we have received so far more than 120,000 proposals in Horizon Europe, with more than 500,000 partners within these projects. And we have signed more than 18,000 grants. And of course, this is all distributed among different types of actions, different reimbursement rules, different implementing bodies, different goals, different several thematic priorities, and so on. And that is the reason why we are constantly asking for feedback from many different areas and from many different types of stakeholders. We started last year, beginning of last year, with a big survey that was not only for Horizon Europe, but for all programs directly managed of the European Commission. And we received more than 30,000 replies for this, which gave us very useful insights in the challenges and the problems related to implementation. One consideration, one observation is that quite a number of applicants have to use or had to use paid consultancy services in order to get into the program, to prepare proposals, or also to manage the proposals. And this is in particular the case for SMEs who lack the administrative capacity for going into such a complex program. We also acknowledge that when you have a grant and it is signed, we have quite some requirements for reporting on the progress and on different performance indicators, which, according to the replies to this questionnaire survey, make a very significant share of the burden that is perceived by our participants. So we have to look into this again and try to make this also simpler, using all the possibilities of the new digital world, trying to avoid asking you for information if we can gather it ourselves, and so on. Coming now to the lump sums, Matthias mentioned already, not everybody is 100% convinced that this is simplification, but in this survey, we saw that 2 in 3 respondents actually confirm that for them, lump sum funding is a simplification. And it is in particular interesting to see that the ones who were already involved in lump sum projects are more positive than the ones who don't have experience yet with this. And this is in a certain sense a general observation. When we want to simplify, we have to change things. And change is not always perceived as something very convenient. So very often our simplification measures need also people to get used to it. And we see this with the lump sums, but we might also see this in the future with other more substantial improvements that we are reflecting upon. And so we should not get discouraged by a learning curve that we observe in these areas. The other important aspect we are investing a lot in is, of course, better communication and better guidance, explaining better how the rules are and how they have to be implemented. Here we also, of course, rely on your suggestions on making this kind of guidance, communication, training, online and on-site and IT implemented guidance and help even better than today. I think with this I finish my introductory words, and I will now hand over to Ulrich Genschel, who will guide us through the first part of this discussion. And I welcome, of course, again our 5 panelists who are joining us remotely. I hope technically everything will work well. over to you, Ulrich.
Thank you very much, Peter, for this introduction and framing the discussion. Looking forward now to meeting our 5 panelists who are not only distinguished scientists and innovators, but really practitioners in Horizon Europe and previous framework programs, so over a number of years really experienced in the program. While we are discussing with them, please keep entering your suggestions in Slido and keep upvoting the suggestions of others. Like to remind you, it's not really a Q&A session, so ideally you phrase your points in Slido as concrete suggestions, as concrete as possible, as Peter said, not really a question for us on how things work currently. That's not the focus of today. So with that, I'd like to invite our first panelist, that is Professor Theodore Alexandrov at the University of California, San Diego, if I'm not mistaken. But Professor Alexandrov used to be at the EMBL in Hamburg for many years. That's the link to Europe and the framework program. Alexandrov, could you start giving your views, experience, and suggestions for running the program?
Sure. Yeah, thank you very much for organizing this. And indeed, I worked at EMBL in Heidelberg in Germany, but before that at the University of Bremen, and now I'm UC San Diego. So I have quite some experience in European research and funding, but also exposed to other systems, in particular American system. So my background is and expertise in spanning from mathematics, computer science, cloud computing to molecular biology and pharmacology. So I participated in different health programs, but also in ICT. And also I have a bit of exposure to industrial work. I co-founded companies and also work with a number of companies. So I would like to start with the premise that for me personally, for our team, European funding was really the backbone for our most influential developments. So that means, I mean, European funding works actually pretty well already. So, and I have exposure to consortia. I coordinated some, but also ERC, and also participated in various funding programs in NIH and national and so on. So my summary here, I've been reflecting on this, is some programs work really well. So I think ERC works extremely well. And I hear this also from scientists in the US. So many people think that this is almost like exemplary program. It's large and flexible funding, but at the same time, it's accessible. So, and also selection works great pretty much for anyone I see who got ERC. And if I know their research, they're really excellent scientists. So that means, I mean, here, like, I would say the main goal is like not really to break it, but for the support that as it goes. And consortia, on the other hand, from my experience coordinating, but also working in consortia and seeing American consortia, I think this can be improved probably the most if we would like to improve. So, and I think consortia, they work really great for networking. However, the joint work, in particular, like on the scale of the whole consortia, can be improved. So, and what I have seen, and also I worked myself, is that there is great coordination preparing the proposal, but then afterwards, during the work on the project, things just get fragmented. So, and there is normally the whole consortium of maybe 8 partners and so on, it's really getting pushed and driven to success by a team of 2-3 partners. So why is it the case? Why we have like pretty often this big consortia? So, I mean, there are some requirements, but requirements normally don't say kind of should be 8 partners. However, this is what I have seen quite often. The question is, how can we actually make consortia so that it will be those like driven and motivated and productive teams working together without, say, bystanders, right? So, and the question is like about how to change how to motivate, how to enable motivate, but also maybe how to do it throughout for the submission, but also throughout the program. because I think that there is quite a lot which can be improved on. So what's going on through the project and how this affects the productivity, but also joint work. Like intermediate reports, they really help only somewhat. The final report, I mean, doesn't really help. I think the final report mainly helps to write a good final report. So, I mean, yeah. So what can be done with this? I don't really know, but I think that maybe more power to coordinators, and in particular, the coordinators on the budget questions. Because on one hand, coordinators, they have most responsibility. They are quite often the most driven and also experienced. On the other hand, if they have already a partner who is not underperforming or maybe not motivated, there is not that much you can do as coordinator about it. So that means consortia, I think that there is still some work here and space for improvements. Moving on to support for startups. So I think that support for startups can be improved quite a bit. EIC is great, but it's big and very, very low acceptance rate. So if you look at the US, then there is programs like SBIR, STTR, which provide smaller grants but with high acceptance rate. And I know that many startups in the US, they really start with these grants and they're supported and this great ecosystem. So I think it's missing in Europe. And then also maybe small grants for preparing grants. In Denmark, and I had a pretty big grant actually in Denmark. So they have this program called EU Upstart, where you can get about 10,000 euros just to write a grant. And for startups, it can be useful. And the final point is grant writing and management companies. And I think there are pros and cons here. So I actually work with many of these companies. And sometimes they're very useful, in particular for less experienced coordinators. But I kind of see the tendency that these grant writing companies, they actually take more and more share of the grant, and they do more and more work on kind of like packaging the proposal. And I think this is in general what I see with the European proposals compared to, say, American and other ones, that there is quite a lot of work to write it, and there is a lot kind of like very particular style and quite formal style of writing it, which almost kind of like forces and coordinators and submitters to really search for support. And if they don't have this support, so locally have this expertise, they kind of almost like forced to go to these companies. So I think this can be improved and also discussed how to make it so these companies will not become like even like taking even bigger shares of the grant funding. So with this, I would like to wrap up, and I would like to once again highlight that for us, European funding was the backbone, the consortia, and also ERC. And so I'm very grateful to European Commission and also everyone, project officers and reviewers for all this.
Thanks very much, Theodore. That was already a first very, very interesting statements with the perspective from the USA as well. I suggest we are not going to discuss this directly now, but go to the next speakers first, and then we are going to discuss with the panel. So I'd like to give the floor to Larissa Florea, who is a professor in chemistry at Trinity College Dublin in Ireland. Larissa, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Yes, I'm based in Trinity College Dublin in Ireland, and my expertise is in polymer chemistry and specifically synthesizing stimuli-responsive polymers to create actuators and sensors, so quite fundamental work. And to just give a very brief but concrete overview of my experience with European funding, same as for Theodore, this was really and still is at the core of the funding that I have in my lab. I have an ERC starting grant. I'm partner in 2 EIC projects, one EIC Pathfinder Open and one EIC Challenge. And more recently, I coordinate an EIC transition. So while my ERC looked at fundamental principles and mechanisms for creating microactuators and microvehicles for microrobotic applications, the 2 EICs. In the two EICs, I use my expertise in microfabrication to actually create implantable sensors that have real-world use. And finally, the EIC transition that I coordinate, that only started this year, looks at the development and commercialization of a smart implant device for anastomosis healing monitoring. And this is driven by an SME that is a spin-off from Trinity, fantastic company called Plio Surgical. So these are some examples of the successful funding that I got from the European Commission. But of course, with this comes also a long list of proposals that were not funded. And I can discuss the differences between funded and non-funded, but probably that is not the main interest of today's. So regarding support, because this was already mentioned in the introduction, in my institution and the research center, we do receive a lot of support for making budgets, including lump sum budgets, for admin, for completing forms, the A forms, everything. So, and also for setting up the award once funded. And I think this is very important. And because of the institutional support, I didn't have to ever have in my consortia a consultancy firm that is only dedicated to manage the project. So in that sense, I guess institutional support is really important. Of course, not all is perfect, and this is why we're here today to share our views, to try to make it better, simpler. From my point of view, of course, shorter project proposals, less time dedicating to reviewing the projects, writing deliverables, would drastically improve the time that we actually spend on doing the work that we are proposing. Just like Theodore, I'm also a big fan of the ERC program. And this is because of the freedom that you get in managing the project, the relationship you have with your project officers, the fact that you feel like everyone is on your side. And this does allow you to really dedicate your time to the science. And as Theodore has said, all of these scientists who have ERC grants are actually, you know, very successful, and their science that they are doing is actually really good. So I have been part, and I am part of different EIC consortia, and I do feel the same, that even if the consortium is very large, that there are some key partners that are really driving the proposal towards success. And sometimes just having a large number of partners might not be, you know, a requirement. Is more important that the key partners that just bring what is needed for that project are involved in the project. Success rates, of course, is always a challenge, and scientific articles have shown that having a success rate of 15% or higher is really what would be ideal, because it will take chance as much as possible out of the equation. Because we all know that too often great proposals do not get funded because of low success rates on some of these programs. It doesn't mean that they will never get funded, but of course, a lot of time is spent in actually resubmitting these proposals, making changes, and having all of the proposals reviewed again. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this. So this is from my side.
Thanks a lot, Larissa. Well, thanks a lot. And we are going directly to the next speaker and come back to that point also maybe on the success rates. Of course, I think some of you followed the implementation dialogue. We expect, even if the Commission proposal of doubling the funding for Horizon Europe in the next multi-annual financial framework from 2028, there will still be proposals that will not be funded. So the success rate might be higher, but this phenomenon as such will probably never go away, but we can see how we can handle it in the best possible way. So we can come back to discussing that with the other panelists afterwards. So now I would like to give the floor to Gaia Navarino, who is a genetics professor at the Institute of Science and Technology in Austria. Gaia, please take the floor.
Hello, good morning, everyone, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to give my impressions on this topic. So, as it was mentioned, so I am at the Institute of Science and Technology in Austria since now about 12 years. And before that, I was in the US, in Germany, and in Italy. I am a neurogeneticist, so working on neuroscience of genetic disorders, so connecting also a little bit the world of basic research to the translational aspects. So as the previous speakers, I have quite an experience with different grant types. So I'm also an holder of ERC grants, starting in consolidator, but also quite a bit of consortia grants. And so let me start just as really in a positive note, that saying that both, as it was already mentioned, I mean, ERC, obviously, it's really, in general, the European grants, as Theodore was saying, are really the backbone of my research and my lab. And that ERC grants obviously are really a very important part and very in giving the freedom to carry out the research that we are doing. Besides that, I think that consortium grants are also very important in the sense that really gives the possibility to researchers from different either disciplines, but also very importantly countries, to get together. So I'm a very strong supporter of this idea that not everything can be done in the same place. And especially working in an extremely good institute, but in a small country that is Austria, I think that those consortia grants really give a possibility to tackle scientific challenges in a global way and really getting together to join forces. So I really think that those projects and those grants are very important for research. It was mentioned before several times, so at the beginning and also now the other two speakers, the success rate and evaluation process. And so I am also a very strong supporter of a two-stage evaluation process, given the fact, as it was mentioned just now, also that success rate is not extremely high. And so it's writing those proposals is very time consuming. And therefore, I really value this two-stage process as a way to really pre-screen potentially successful projects and then really to have the possibility to expand at a later stage. And in general, I think that many scientists are thinking alike. And so if I have a two-stage process, eventually I am more likely to accept to get into such a collaboration than if instead I have to write from the very beginning a very long proposal. Regarding then the coordination of that, I actually don't have experience, and because in the majority of the cases I really kind of step away from that because I'm very much scared of the amount of work that this entails. And so from my experience and from what I have seen, to really be a very good coordinator, you just need to be a good coordinator, but you need to have especially good support, which actually here at ISTA I have. So in principle, I could go there, but really not everyone has. And so I think this is really key, not just for the application itself, that if it's really, if you have to prepare it alone, it's extremely difficult, but also, as it was mentioned earlier, for the implementation phase. And I think the implementation phase for me is the one where we need the most of support and maybe the most of development yet. And there are a few things that I think that can be can be improved. One is really the reporting phase. I'm also not sure yet the way the reporting is done, how really useful is for the consortium itself, and also for the people that are getting the feedback. So I think maybe something where there is a little bit more interaction, it could be, if that is possible, it could be somewhat nice to consider. Something like, I don't know, if there are possibility to have a sort of more conference-like, talks-like, where really the science is brought up. And I also think that in the implementation phase is very important to monitor different aspects, going from the science to the, obviously, to the budget management, but as well also code of conduct of the entire consortium and especially of the coordinator. In the implementation phase, I think in general, and this it was not mentioned too much about how important it is to look at the size of the consortium. I think that, so I have participated in consortia that were rather smaller and some that were really, really big. And in general, I believe that the ones that are slightly smaller, they work way better. There is it's much more organic. It's easier to have an exchange, and so at the end they are more efficient, and so they are also better in, or maybe the likelihood to deliver is higher. And maybe as a last point, it is, I think it might be really important to establish more this contact between the consortium and the project officer, not just as a controller kind of what is going on, but more really as a dialogue on how things could be implemented in a better way, and how what type of support maybe the consortium needs to move on. So I kind of suggested earlier in some interviews like that, for instance, have sort of surveys to understand how the consortium is doing, not just through the coordinator, but really through the researchers, or things that, and really with the aim of trying to help the implementation of the research would be helpful. So I think those are the most points. I certainly, I forgot probably something, but those are the most important points I wanted to make.
Many thanks, Gaia. That was very interesting. And if you have other points, please bring them up in the discussion afterwards. I found already very interesting to hear that even you, who are a rather experienced participant in Horizon Europe, in Horizon 2020, would normally avoid being a coordinator. And of course, we need coordinators in our multi-beneficiary projects. So that's maybe also something to look at. Thanks very much. Now, I'd like to go to our next speaker. That is Professor Jan Peters at the Technical University of Darmstadt. Jan, please share your views with us.
Hey, thank you very much. So let me start again by introducing myself. I've been a researcher I'm a professor at Technical University of Darmstadt. I'm also a department head at the German AI Research Center, DFKI. Before that, I have done research at the Max Planck Institutes for Intelligent Systems and Biological Cybernetics. I've also done research at National University of Singapore, the University of Southern California, and the ATR Institute in Japan. I am quite experienced both as a reviewer for internationally for most European countries, for Israel, for the US, including NSF, for Canada, including NSERC, as well as local grants of different other Canadian states like Alberta, and Canadian CFAR chairs. For the EU, I've been a reviewer and panel member for the FED. I've been a panel member and reviewer for ERC at Starting Grant, Consolidator, Synergy, and Advanced Grants. I have been panel member for several units on collaborative projects, and all of that already between in FP7, but also in Horizon 2020 and Horizon in Europe. I've had FED projects, I've had collaborative projects, I had an ERC starting grant and ERC proof of concept grants, and I think I actually had at least the first German, maybe even the first ever EIC transition grant, with an extremely nice rating, I should say. And so I have a lot of experience on writing projects, and also a lot of having projects. So I think altogether 15 different European Union projects, and obviously I've had loads of German national projects and local Hessian projects and industry projects in my life as well. So I have good level of comparison. I would particularly want to make a little bit of a statement. I've really had really good luck of growing up with an amazing unit within the European Union, since the cognitive systems and robotics unit, it got renamed a few times, cognitive systems and robotics stuck with me particularly, was outstanding, particularly when they were allowed, sufficient freedom in FP7. This was a really good place to grow up as a young professor scientifically, because I learned as a reviewer from them, I learned as a panel member from them, and I learned by, having grants through them, and also by all the strong personal engagement of the project officers in both respects. And I gotta say, there are things where, the things have gone worse in comparison to FP7. Since in FP7, the EU reviewing was probably the best place to meet prominent scientists in AI research, in robotics, in machine learning, in cognitive systems, in cognitive science. And we tremendously profited from their input. And since then, and these were the top scientists in these fields. And since then, because we are limiting ourselves to European reviewers, yes, we're getting third-rate reviewers reviewing the first-rate and second-rate scientists, since most people participate in the calls. And so obviously you can't not have any top people from Europe reviewing. And as the people from outside Europe are no longer reviewing and panel members, that's actually, it was a big step down. So after all the positive things which have been said, I agree with all the positive things, but I think this is a very important point to bring home, that I think that's something where FP7 was just tremendously much better. I'm also very happy with the new things, of course, with good things like lump sum funding is really amazing thing, and I think that's really important. Getting rid of timesheets would be such a good thing. You need to imagine, like at DFKI, I have staff which can actually take properly care of these things. But at the Technical University of Darmstadt, we have one full-time employee who just advises these people how to fill out these timesheets, since it's so easy to make a mistake under German law of all the different things which are necessary under German law, but all the other things which are required in the timesheets. And an average scientist would require a PhD in timesheets to fill this out. Luckily, we have a dedicated person at TU Darmstadt, but once that person quits, all the timesheets are going to be wrong, since it's so complicated to do this. So this is another thing where I think this lump sum funding is really important to universities, and to get rid of timesheets for universities, I think it's an absolute must in the future. I would also highlight one more point. What was really great in FP7 was the so-called negotiations, where the negotiations were actually, project improval situations. So the project officers would frequently tell us, okay, merge these things, make this more streamlined, and then they would give us really good advice at how to improve the project, and these changes would be done immediately. Now, instead, we have to do them by amendments. And these amendments take more time, they're more effort. And there's even a higher barrier for scientists, again, to do an amendment versus having a good chat during the negotiations face-to-face and figuring out, okay, these are the things which really could be improved, then noticing it later and then having to do typically twice the work and at a much higher, how to put this, psychological cost, because we have to go do them via amendment instead of before the project. And so, having said that, I'm incredibly thankful for the European Union funding. I think most of the AI-based robotics research in Germany, in Europe, potentially even in Israel, would not have even taken place without the European projects. And all over, the European Union does a tremendous job, the reviewing quality, when compared to, okay, now I have to bite on my tongue, when compared to several other agencies, is just outstanding. I've learned so much from project officers, from being part of panels, and from submitting to projects. It was an outstanding experience all over. But I hope that the tiny criticism which I put in was okay. With that, I am at the end of my 5 minutes, I hope. And yeah, looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Jan. That was a lot of points from a rather rich career and a lot of experience with the program. So I'm sure that will come back also in the discussion in many ways. For now, I'd like to give the floor to our last speaker, our last panelist, and that is Anna Sandak, professor in Slovenia at the University of Primorska. Anna, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's really honor and pleasure to share my experience with the Horizon Europe funding scheme. I have the background in biology and material science, and my research work is at the intersection of these two disciplines. We are developing engineered living materials for the building sector. So over the past years, I have participated in the different projects across all three pillars, as well as the widening scheme. 8 years ago, I moved to Slovenia to join InnoRenew, a teaming project that recently merged with University of Primorska. And this is a strong example how European programs can build lasting research capacity in the widening countries. As a principal investigator, I hold the ERC Consolidator grant, recently selected as a Science for EU success story. I also coordinate Pathfinder Open project, which was recently invited to join one of the portfolios. I'm active in Pillar 2 projects, including Cluster 4 Twin Transition and NEP-related initiatives. My postdoc have been awarded Marie Curie Individual Fellowship, which of course strengthened their careers as well as our research teams. Those experiences highlight the Horizon Europe unique strength. It supports researchers at every career stage, foster international collaboration, and create multiple effect when one project generates new opportunities, careers, and long-term capacity. From the perspective of last years, I think there are several good practices in Horizon Europe. The training session and information days you are organizing help participants to understand the calls. Evaluations are faster, usually up to 5 months, and more transparent, with clear criteria and external expert involvement. As colleague mentioned before, in particular, the ERC shows how rigorous panels and multiple reviewers can ensure excellence and fairness. Horizon Europe is strongly impact-oriented, linking research to the societal challenges such as climate, health, and digital transformation. There are also other practices like two-stage calls, lump sum budgets, and asking for feedback, like, for example, call for evidence, implementation dialogue, or the event like you are organizing today. And also strong science for society initiatives, such as Science for EU campaign, that also very worth to mention. I believe that those practices can help researchers to navigate the system and should be further implemented in the FP10. But of course, there are areas for improvement. So the first, proposal calls. As colleagues mentioned before, I also think that proposals are often unnecessarily long and which are adding extra burden to the reviewers. Maybe shorter and clear templates would improve the evaluation quality and help better idea to stand out. Some parts which are recently in the excellence science, such as data management plan, gender dimension, and open science practice, perhaps can be moved to the part A when ethics and security are. This will give more space to elaborate on the excellence. And finally, more bottom-up calls can boost competitiveness and drive innovation by allowing researchers to exploit novel idea, but beyond predefined topic. The second part is administrative process. Many procedures are complex and time-consuming, especially for inexperienced participants. The ERC show different approach, trust and simplicity, with flexible budget and proportional reporting. If other funding scheme can adapt this approach, or if data which are entered at once can be used across reporting layers, this will really reduce the burdens on the researchers. And the third are regulatory and market challenges. Low TRL projects face barriers with regulation, standardization, and market entry. Grouping projects with similar topic as the EIC portfolio approach, for example, could help teams to share solution while respecting, of course, ethics and confidentiality. And finally, fourth, the collaboration with industry. IP and exploitation results can slow down the partnership. However, adoption and deployment of new products and technologies are essential if we want to translate innovation to the real-world impact. Clear agreement and strong support tools such as EIC's business accelerator services, trainings, and coaching would make the collaboration smoother. I personally benefited from the women leadership training under Pathfinder Open project, which complemented the scientific focus on my project. In conclusion, Horizon Europe has enabled excellent science and research shaping opportunities, and FP10 can certainly build on that success by making proposals shorter, process simpler, collaboration easier, and supporting early career researchers even stronger. This would make the program more efficient and impactful for everyone involved. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Anna. That brings us to the end of the presentation of the 5 panelists that we invited today. I think there were already quite a number of points that came up in several of the talks. I'm not sure if technically we can now actually bring in on screen all 5 of our panelists to have a talk amongst each other and with us. I noted a few points that I thought came up a couple of times. I have the effort needed for writing proposals, and that in relation to the success rate, to the low success rate in many cases, the quality of experts that may have gone down over years for various reasons, the size of consortia and the ease of collaboration within consortia, the level of reporting and the number of deliverables, and the freedom to develop the work, the project for the consortium, and maybe finally simpler forms, simpler templates. These were topics that I heard, but this was not limited. So I wonder, would any one of you like to take the floor and give us their take on what we just heard from the 5 of you? Is there anyone among you who would like to give it a start? If not, I mean, we could also, of course, pose particular questions, if that's maybe an easier start. So when we heard the feedback from several of you that well, proposal writing is a major effort. Maybe in some cases, there is consortia pay more attention to writing and developing their proposal than their motivation during the project. So how do you see that? How do you see that, and how can this be made easier? Is the 2-stage approach, the 2-stage calls, is that the answer to this problem? What else would be needed? I see Jan is raising a hand.
I think actually a two-stage approach would be quite nice to that, since there are a lot so there are some groups which are really, really good at pulling together these proposals, who have near professional, nearly perfect professionals on the topic of putting consortia together, and they also manage the projects then really well, but are really in there for the management and not for the science. If you're in there for the science, the time was better in FP7 because and since then it's become quite hard because the overhead with the companies, has just become too much for most scientists. So I would, for example, not coordinate it or do the scientific coordination for a project anymore because it would just overwhelm me at the moment. I think the two-stage process would be very nice, but it should be different from the ERC. In the ERC, you have to submit both a part B1, which is on which the proposals to be interviewed are being selected, as well as the part B2, which is the actual proposal together. It would probably be a really, really cool thing to just get eligible by putting in a good 5-pager and sort out, reduce basically the number of people who write proposals so that they can write better ones, but then also limit the number of proposals you can submit, since right now it's better to participate in a lot of proposals, since simply the chances are, well, then just automatically better, right? They sum up, and that would create a better two-stage process than currently in place for the ERC, for example. But for the ERC, you can only submit one, so that's, I guess, okay.
Yes, if I can add
Sure.
to that, I do agree with what was said, and I also believe that having a short turnaround is important, so that you find out if you are successful in the first stage in a rather short period of time, so that the momentum is still there and you can prepare the full proposal. And I guess, again, with the idea of the success rate, should be considered that only a certain number of proposals could go through to the second stage. So somewhere in the second stage, you have a success rate of a considerably high success rate, because there's no point in allowing, a high number of proposals to go to the second stage if at the second stage the success rate remains 10% or something like that. It really has to be significantly higher.
Yes, that's clear. And I think arguably what we do in our two-stage calls today is following these principles as such. We are aiming for success rates of, let's say, 1 in 2.5, 1 in 3 at stage 2. I can't guarantee that this is always the case or has always been the case in every two-stage call, but the principle is there, and also that at stage 1 you don't have to submit a full proposal. That these principles exist, but of course we don't use two-stage throughout. That is, so there is always the decision for how many calls to use that. I think Peter would like to come in on this as well, or?
Yes, maybe a follow-up question on the two-stage calls. They have a lot of advantages, as you just say, but they have one big disadvantage, that they increase the overall time to grant from the submission of the first proposals to actually when a project can start. Is this not a factor that would also have to be taken into account? And I ask this question not only to the panel, but also to our participants who follow us remotely. Maybe you can put your thoughts on this in Slido. Maybe we also have some industry representatives in the broader audience who can issue their opinion on this. So, timing, is this an issue for two-stage?
Jan, please go ahead.
I don't think that timing actually would be such a big problem. If I just take the example of the ERC again, where I in the time between between notification that you get invited to the interview and that you do the interview, I could have easily written now it's better B2 than I could have than I wrote when I submitted it together with a B1. So for that reason, I don't think it would make anything slower if we can get the chance of submitting the proposal in between. And I think it would tremendously lower the number of proposals and the reviewing load, not only on the EC, but also on the people writing proposals, and therefore lead to better proposals, which in project quality then will pay off again, because we have thought more of the things through and at a higher quality level.
Okay, thank you. Any other views? Of course, to be considered that in such a scheme where you have a low threshold at stage 1, we would expect normally to see a higher, maybe a significantly higher number of proposals at stage 1. So you'd in a way pay for that high success rate at stage 2 with a potentially very low success rate at stage 1. Is that something that you would still consider a worthwhile step, even though then we might have less than 10% success rate at stage 1?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure you are seeing the hands or not. So
yes, I do. But when please go ahead, Gaia, and then we have.
Because Anna, you were also wanted to talk. But,
yeah.
So I have first a general comment. I think about timing. I think any of us is probably willing to put into those grants the time, as long as this is also is aligning with our core scientific interests. And so rather, in my view, rather than just looking, I mean, this two-stage part is an important part, but I think that while we have to make things slimmer, it's also important to think about how to make things more interesting in a way, and not how to create artificial topics or way to push people to do things that they don't really want to do, but they are somehow forced to do because then they have to find the right configurations with others. So I think the ERC was brought up often as an example, because I would say that anyone here would argue that applying for ERC, going through the interview, it's a lot of time, and way more time than probably we have put in many other grants. But at the same time, is really at the core of what we are doing. So I know this is not directly answer to your question about the two-stage, not the two-stage. So personally, again, I think that for the consortium grant, it's really this two-stage is very helpful, again, because it kind of helps you to get closer to a success rate that you want to have to eventually put in that time. But I also think that if things are done in a way, or if we think in a way that we are implementing those grants really to address the core interest of research interest of scientists, maybe also people will be happy to put a little bit more time than instead if creating large consortia that are coming or going a little bit away from core interests. So I think those two things, basically time and core interest, how to frame those grants is equally important.
Thank you, Gaia. I think that's related to what we also heard about the size of the consortium and the freedom to develop the project in the way that you or the consortium would like to. Anna, you wanted to come in as well.
Yes, I just also would like to comment regarding the two-stage proposal. I think it's absolutely a great suggestion, and doesn't have to really compromise the duration of the evaluation, because when we have like the first round, usually the first feedback we are receiving in 5 months, and I absolutely understand this because the number of the proposals submitted is recently insane. Like for example, for Marie Curie, it was like 17,000 proposals submitted this year. So this is an enormous burden for the reviewers. But then when we have the feedback, I think 2 months should be enough to write the full proposal, assuming then we have consortium set, we have the idea which was further developing in our brains. And then just 2 months should be enough. And then again, for the second stage, usually they are invited like 3 times more proposal than can be funded. So also this is helping the reviewers to select the most outstanding ideas, because they have much less burden on their side. So I absolutely agree that the 2-stage proposal doesn't have to necessarily be longer than traditional one. And moreover, the second stage doesn't have to be also this 40, 50 pages. We can also have a look at the Pathfinder projects when we have the 20 pages, and this is including everything. So maybe the second stage doesn't have to be also that long as currently it is the proposal.
Thank you. Maybe we'll not be able to go through all the points that you raised in your contributions before, but there was one that I really quite think is important, and I would like maybe to have your panel discussion. It's the quality of experts, because how we select our proposals and how we select the grants, rather, that is key to the quality of the program. So having the right experts in the right place is really is a key step for the impact and the quality of the program overall. So I'm not sure, Jan made a relatively strong statement that the quality has gone down over the years. I'm not sure, is that shared by all of you to some extent or not? That is something I'd like to know. And then of course, if there's anything you see, how we can significantly improve that.
Maybe on the shared, Anna may wants to go first, and I can suggest a remedy afterwards.
Okay. Okay. I will
Anna,
mainly
please.
refer to the ERC grant, and then I was like absolutely surprised because I was at the interview, so the proposal was evaluated by the panel expert. Usually there are 15-20 people, but then when I received the feedback, there was also 8 external reviewers who was reading my proposal. So I think with having so many feedback, and they were really like to the point. So I think the bias is really minimized. So, but in the pillar 2, for example, you have less reviewers, and of course somebody might like your project or understand better or not. But I think the ERC is also showing the excellence in the evaluation, which we can learn from. And maybe Jan, you can put at your point now.
Okay. First, my point about the reviewing quality was about the collaborative projects. Since for the collaborative projects, it is extremely hard to find reviewers. Whereas I totally agree for the ERC, because typically not everyone submits every year in ERC, and if you're fit to a call, well, you can only submit every 5 years. So if you have a project after all, so the number of finding good reviewers there inside Europe is possible. For the collaborative projects, it's just hard. If there is a call on AI-based robotics, it's impossible that not to have a conflict of interest anymore. For me, for example, in Germany, we have a joint project between all major labs on AI-based robotics, all 15 of them, 15 universities, inviting me as a reviewer, since the project started last year, is literally impossible now. But there's one remedy which we should consider within the European Union. That is, we look to the US. In the US, in robotics, for example, they have they have proposals, not as collaborative projects, but as for the single person proposals, and they split by last name of the PI, and one half reviews the other half of the last names, and thereby they can ensure that there is no bias, no overlap, and they can have the top US researchers all involved in the reviewing, which otherwise would have to be done completely by foreigners. And I think this mechanisms like that need to be found too.
Yeah, that's certainly a very interesting mechanism that starts to be explored also by national funders in Europe. I mean, that's distributed peer review. I understand, Jana. That's where one half of the applicants reviews the other half. I mean, certainly a very interesting approach to be explored. Theodore.
Yes, very interesting discussion concerning the review. So I participated in a few, and I think what's a little bit missing for the consortia is that, I mean, reviewers have actually a lot of work reading the super long reviews, and what do they get out of this? And pretty much nothing. So, but let's consider, say again, ERC as an example. I think for ERC to be in the panel of ERC, this is, I mean, I was not, but from what I've heard, this is actually a rewarding experience. And why is it a rewarding experience? Because also, as Jan said, this is an opportunity to really meet with a top-level peers network, and actually you feel you're part of something bigger. So maybe a similar approach can be also done for other programs, but done for the review, where so if suppose like reviewers would be invited, they are part of like panel for 1-2 days, and through this time they go through like many projects.
Mm-hmm.
So coordinator comes, presents, like has, I don't know, 10 minutes to present, 10 minutes to answer questions. And then we as reviewers will come, we would really feel that we're doing a very important job, like, I don't know, 2 days of work, very busy, but then we're in the panel. And so just a suggestion.
No, I like that, to make the review process a more rewarding experience for the experts. That would certainly help. And considering panels, one word, of course, with the comparison with the ERC, and if you have 8, sometimes 10 peer reviews, I don't think that is sustainable for all our projects. And we, as I think was mentioned very early on, there were way more than 100,000 submitted, so it's probably difficult to have 8 or 10 reviewers for all of them. I think there's research showing that indeed, if you have 8, 10 or more reviewers, the bias that you get really goes down, and if you have any outliers in the review process with 8, 9, 10 reviewers, that becomes less important. But I don't think we'll be able to have 10 for an average project. That will, I don't think the capacity, the sheer capacity out there is probably not high enough. Please, I see Larissa.
Yeah, I only have a very short point about this discussion. I think the 2-stage process could also help a lot with this, finding really high quality reviewers for the second stage. So while you can benefit from more general reviewers, maybe for the first stage, for the short proposals, to really bring in, you'll have a bigger pool of excellent reviewers for the second stage.
Right, yeah, that's, I think that also goes in the direction of what we heard from Theodore, where then maybe having a better experience for the reviewer at that stage, and where we might be able to attract more high-level, more high-qualified experts. That I think we might leave our discussion here. Maybe we can still continue on another occasion. And for now, I think it would be interesting to see what Slido has come to, and we would now, in a way, go through from the most popular points, starting with this point submitted by Patricia Lucas. Proposal with deadline in September are very difficult to complete during the summer. Consideration should be given to postponing the opening date and deadline. Yeah, that's thanks very much. I think, I don't know if Peter wants to compliment, but it's the one thing that I can say just for your consideration is that the agenda, the calendar of annual evaluations here with all these many proposals that we receive is very tight. So there's also the Christmas period that we should like to avoid, and it's not easy to place all the various evaluations such that they don't interfere with with that. There's also another consideration that different countries in the EU have different traditions with when the summer holidays actually take place. That in a way goes from June to September, sort of. And again, a theme that we heard before. It is not easy for us to please everybody here because different countries have different approaches and traditions. But thanks very much for that suggestion. Let's move to the next one. Maybe that's for Peter to take.
Yes. So the next suggestion, also a proposal, is suggestion to improve the implementation in the next program to have the main guidance documents like the AGA, which means the annotated grant agreement, ready by the opening of the first calls. Yes, of course, point taken. Just a side remark. You know that already in Horizon Europe, our basic documents like the model grant agreements are not only for Horizon, but applicable throughout all the direct funding. So, and the same applies to the annotations to the grant agreement. So we depend here a lot on the general dynamics in the Commission to finish these documents on time. But that should not hinder us from doing it better next time.
Next point is from Jon Lacunza, and the question is, how will the evaluation process evolve to overcome the impact of artificial intelligence in proposal writing and the expected high decrease in success rate? I suppose that means that artificial intelligence is going to lead to a high number of proposals, and that will lower the success rate. Well, that's an important problem, important question. I don't pretend to have an answer for that, but certainly we'll have to take that into account. I wonder if technically we could now bring in our panel again and see if they have a view on this, because that's an interesting problem that is going to that all funders are going to face in the years to come.
Maybe just quickly, because I think that this is a problem, but it's also obviously we know that is also there are good aspects to it, and it's not just about grants, but we are going through the same problems for PhD students application. I mean, for anything, right? Where we see really a boost in the quality of the writing that compared to earlier. And obviously this comes with a challenge, but we should not forget that this is also democratizing a little bit, because before we were comparing native speakers versus non-native speakers, good writers versus good non-good writers, and not necessarily good scientists versus non-good scientists. So just to say, I don't have a solution either. Maybe someone else has, but not just to say that this is bad, but as also a positive aspect, because eventually we will have a more democratic way to evaluate those proposals based on the scientific idea rather than just the way they are written.
Curiosity to the panel members, are you already using AI for preparing your own proposals? And if yes, how do you use it?
Absolutely yes, for especially for correcting the writing, the English, and helping me to express some of the ideas in a better way.
In fact, it can be very useful to just put the proposal into, like, let's say, Claude or ChatGPT, and ask, write the standard criticism. And it will give you all the standard criticism from the literature, all the ones you have forgotten, and then you know how to address them. I think that's the most useful it is for proposals, for example, also for papers. I would like to elaborate also on remedies. I have just recently had the very terrible experience of having a completely fake AI-generated paper, finding a completely fake AI-generated paper, which makes absurd claims about me as a person and my research, written by some Chinese person at a police university in the middle of nowhere. Springer has still not retracted the paper, but I'm fighting toes and nails to get it retracted. And it turns out that these are quite common. And the problem is actually that they always appear if they get retracted and they disappear. What we should be doing instead, so there are some scientists, I've studied this problem quite a bit by now, there's some scientists who actually say the only remedy is to make it public. So if somebody abuses AI, for example, for proposal writing, and gets found, which is in the end rather easy. It is easy to determine whether text was written by AI or a human being. There are surprisingly good checkers already for that, which give you the right points where it's to highlight. And if somebody gets caught at actually, having a fake proposal from AI, then this needs to be not just, this needs to be made public, and in a way that this proposal is put with a red flag online for the whole world to see. And that seems to be at least theoretically, from the experts on the topic of AI plagiarism, the only way to deal with this problem, whether in publications or in proposals.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. I'm sure we could discuss AI for a lot of time, but maybe we still go to the next question, which is lump sums are simpler when the project is up and running, but proposal preparation and grant negotiation becomes more complex. Yeah, that is a statement that I've heard quite often. I wouldn't necessarily agree, or only to a very small degree, but maybe we can again hear our panel on that statement. Of course, that's not really a suggestion for improvement, but let's see. We can turn it into one. So how could we make the preparation of lump sum proposals easier than it is now? And to what extent is it more complex than traditional actual cost proposals? Any feedback from the panel on that?
Actually, I would directly disagree with this statement. So I've only had one lump sum project so far, but that seems to me, I don't think that the negotiations, as they're no longer existing in the old form, they have not become more difficult, and the planning is about as tough as it was before. You need to have well justified cost items. I'm surprised that projects get funded which don't meet the qualities of the lump sum funding in the prior context. So I think there is actually just a learning curve for people writing proposals here. I hope this doesn't sound arrogant or stupid, but I don't see the point.
No, Jan, okay. I mean, I'm known often as Mr. Lump Sum also by my colleagues, so I would certainly not disagree, but I'm very much aware that, of course, not everybody agrees. Also, Matthias mentioned that at the very beginning, and Peter, so it's not that we are not aware. So maybe other voices from the panel, what do you think? Is there need to make the lump sum proposal simpler? I mean, just to clarify, there is only one difference. It's exactly the same because the form is exactly the same. So the one difference that you have is that you have to provide more justification for the budget. There is a higher resolution of budget figures to provide. That is effectively the difference. And that is, of course, a question how much complexity that adds in relation to the whole proposal stage. Any other?
Well, maybe just one comment, because it's something that I'm experiencing right now. Just finished my report for a midterm for the ERC consolidator. And one thing I have experienced is that in the last 2-3 years, the cost inflation has impacted a lot the way I was distributing the cost earlier. And so the prediction earlier was slightly different from what in reality is. And so that this makes things more complicated. I don't know how much this will impact in the future, but having a very good prediction 4 or 5 years ahead, it may be tricky. to be very exact because of that.
No, that's a very known problem, and you know that we don't index our grants. So we have a maximum grant amount in all of our grants. That doesn't matter which funding model we use. So, and we expect you to carry out a project within that maximum, and that maximum doesn't grow. So, and you have all the liberty and freedom to use this maximum for the project, but except it's not going to grow with inflation. So indeed, be it lump sums, be it actual costs, be it any other funding form, you have to anticipate and put that in your proposal at the time of writing the proposal. Once the grant is signed, there will be no additional funds, and that makes no difference between a lump sum or a non-lump sum.
Yes, to a certain extent, because the way that certain things are impacted is different from others. So it's true that you may be able, I mean, you are still able to do your research, but certain costs are impact more than others. So making this prediction earlier on, it's more difficult than, not knowing how those prices are changing.
Right, okay. Let's maybe move to the next question. For that, we need to switch back to the screen. I think this is for Peter.
Yes, I think that is a repetition of what we heard. A suggestion: move standardized content to part A. For instance, open science, data management, gender equality. It frees up part B and saves time to all. Point taken. We will look into this and see with our colleagues from the departments dealing with these different subjects to see what we can do. Maybe I take already, Chloe, the next question here. Does simplification mean more lump sums? Is the Commission aiming for 100% of projects to be lump sum if it means simplification? If you read the Commission proposal for the next program, you will see that indeed not only for the research program, but for all programs, the so to say standard way of funding should be lump sums. It does not exclude that in certain areas we stay with real costs or we go for other simplified forms of cost. But indeed, the standard, according to the Commission proposal for the next financing period, should be lump sum funding. Of course, this is a Commission proposal, as you know. The legislative process has just started. The Council, meaning the Member States, and the Parliament are the legislators who will finally adopt these proposals. So a lot can still happen between now and then.
The next question is on simplification means keeping rules consistent across programs and using our own practices more, especially for personnel costs. Horizon Europe 1 will overlap with Horizon Europe 2. Yes, I mean, no doubt the keeping things in the same way. I mean, constant and for those people who are used to the program, keeping the rules as much as possible, that is a simplification, at least for those who are used to it. And so we should always consider that the vast majority, in fact, it's really the vast majority of individual organizations that participate in the program have never participated before. They participate once. They have one grant in the entire program. So for them, this advantage doesn't exist. So they never built up this experience. So this is indeed true for those organizations that have been with the program for a long time and have got used to the rules of the game. Keeping these rules constant helps. But at the same time, we sometimes want to and need to make changes if we ever want to really get simplification and streamlining on the road. But no doubt, I agree, this is something to keep in mind, to not change for the sake of changing.
Okay, next question or suggestion. Research managers and administrators work tirelessly to enable scientists to concentrate on their research. their feedback should be taken into account as well. Yes, certainly. I don't think we can be approached by talking not enough to the intermediaries. Maybe this remark is also triggered a bit by the composition of today's panel, which actually is composed of scientists who actually do the research and innovation work. But we have had and will have, of course, countless occasions to also talk to the representations, to the research administrators, to the umbrella organization, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I would even go one step further. I think, if anything, we talk to the intermediaries, to the administration much more. Today is a little bit of an exception to have a panel like this with the practitioners who really work in the projects, who write the proposals, who provide the scientific content. That is, I don't think I've had a webinar like that for a long time. Typically, when we talk to the national contact points, the program committees, to the various umbrella organizations, we typically have very few or even no such people present. I think it's also when you look at the implementation dialogue we had at political level last week, I don't think we had many active scientists there. Of course, these were all very important participants. It was a very important event, but I think to insinuate that we would be talking to scientists too much is probably I wouldn't agree. Anyway, it's the panel. What do you think? Do you have the impression that the university administrations versus the scientists, is that such a big divide? Should we organize the way we listen to the feedback from the participants in a different way?
So my experience is my experience is that the research managers and administrators and the scientists are so intertwined that it's hard to differ. Many times professors leading a consortium or a work package have basically become research managers. Our EU offices at German universities are so small and so stretched out over so many projects, and they would be overwhelmed if they also had now the job of coordinating, in addition to advising scientists on the details which we all can't get along. So they're just too small, these offices for really helping strategically, and they really help us with the execution of things, and they do this very well. But they're really intertwined, and between a project, I can't differ between a research manager and somebody who coordinates a project anymore, since it's just so much of the job is administration and research management.
Thanks, Jan. I think there were several others. Theodore, maybe you wanted to come in as well?
Yes, maybe. Yes, I would like to specifically comment on this. Yes, I absolutely agree that European Commission should work very closely with administrators to really figure out the best procedures and to reduce the workload on them, because managing all this project. But on the other hand, I think that it's working pretty well. So grant managers, I know they're in touch with the NCTs and the POs and so on. So what I would like to emphasize that, so for me personally, it was really a great motivation to come today, because I've heard that EC is interested to talk to scientists and to talk maybe not high-level administrative scientists, but people like us. So I would really encourage that. I would say that this is really exceptional, but I would ask, how can EC actually make it a bit more widespread and maybe bring it outside of just this call and outside of these 5 experts that you selected, so that you will get actually feedback to your programs and to your new initiatives? Because this is ultimately for scientists, and you can get so many. And I'm also looking at this slider today. If you just take the best, like the top voted comments there, you'll get so much feedback. But now, how can you get it to reach out to big communities of scientists? And I think this is what's a little bit missing from the perspective of scientists. I think we kind of we're looking at AC as huge organization where we talk to POs, some feedback is coming, but there is maybe a little bit back of our participation. And again, since we are so grateful, we actually will be ready to feed you with our feedback and input.
Thanks, Theodore. Anybody else? I thought this topic raised some people's interest, but any of the others still want to come in? Anna?
Yes, I really think you are doing a good job of having this feedbacks and this like the reality check and all this initiative, which is like really gathering the overview of point of view of different researchers, manager, and administrator people. So I think this is like really, I would say it's rare to have this so broad. And I was particularly also like, I'm very grateful that we were like all interviewed before having this opportunity to join this panel and then share the feedback directly. So I think it's really the way, this is the way to go, to be ready for the constructive feedback and to be ready to open mind and of course, as it was mentioned before, it's very hard to please everyone, and then it will be always some compromise. But I think more feedback you have, the better it will be. Thank you.
Thanks. I think with that, let's maybe move to the next point.
Maybe that's for me when researchers use their institution's PIC, the participant identification code, the institution should have full access to the proposal from the minute the PIC is inserted. So I assume when you say the institution should have full access, you mean the so-called legal entity appointed representative, so somebody in the central administration of the organization. We also discussed this already many times. We heard this remark many times. We are trying to improve the interaction between, so to say, the central administrative level and the people starting to prepare a proposal. But here I would be particularly interested in hearing the voices of the panelists, because you are the scientists who start drafting a proposal. So would you have an issue if from the moment you open our SEP tool and start putting in the first data in the system, that your so-called legal entity appointed representative sees this immediately? Yeah, please. Larissa.
So from my point of view, of course not. I will have nothing against that. At the end of the day, if the research is funded, the contracts are signed with the legal entity. It's not with me personally, but the legal representative, the institution. Therefore, I think it makes sense if this is something that is desired, that they have access to from the start to the proposal submission.
Anybody having a different opinion from the, yes?
Just it's maybe you have to do some significant changes in the online interface in this case, since I'm pretty sure that for every proposal submitted, there are at least 20 which have not been submitted, and where they were just if you can easily overwhelm these tiny EU offices we have, at least in German universities. They can't find even the proposals anymore, which they would like. We need them to help upon. So, but otherwise, I don't see any major hurdle. But you need to do a significant software change.
Thanks. Maybe go to the next question.
Can we see the next question? So that is, drop the dashboard for personnel costs. It does not reflect actual personnel costs, especially for senior staff. Experts not well qualified to judge person costs. Now that is, again, a comment on the lump sums. I think there's a misunderstanding because the dashboard does not show personnel costs for senior staff. It only shows the average personnel cost of countries and specific organization types in these countries. That is sort of a principle we have in the lump sum funding, where indeed, you need some degree of justification, why you need senior staff in your project. That's not a given, and how much. So I think it's perfectly normal that in any proposal you justify why you need a certain number of postdocs, PhD students, professors, highly skilled or lower skilled staff, and relate that to the costs that you propose. And the dashboard is indeed only an orientation, and it's only used as an orientation in lump sum funding. In fact, the cases where we disallow personnel costs as a result of checking against that dashboard are few and far between. But it does happen, but it's really the exception rather than the rule. Again, I'm not sure if any of our 5 panelists have already experienced in any way this dashboard or have had costs disallowed as a result of it. I don't know. That would be. There's no specific feedback on that. So anyway, we are on this occasion, I can say, because that's not really a suggestion, that's a statement. You could come back to our next lump sum webinar, which takes place on the 2nd of October at 10 o'clock. You will find the event again, like this one, on the Funding and Tenders portal advertised. Next question.
Suggestion, making it clear already at the proposal stage how many reporting periods there will be and their lengths to enable better planning, especially in lump sums. For me, this is kind of obvious because the sequence of reporting periods is in the hands of the applicant. So you can propose this in your proposal. It is not something that will be imposed on you by the funding body or the commission.
Or very rarely, I think, as Peter says, you put this in the proposal, and except in very unusual circumstances, this will normally, if the grant is funded, this will go through. And I don't think, but it's not impossible to have it changed indeed during grant preparation, but that should be the exception.
Next.
Could the ownership control declaration be included in the individual organization's basic data? It would be more efficient for the partners and coordinators. I think maybe that is a good question for Peter.
Yes.
Indeed.
So I guess not everybody knows what it's all about. There are actually several measures that were introduced in the last years and months on the subject of the so-called research security. And one of them is this ownership and control declaration. So there are certain areas of the program where we have to exclude participants that are controlled from organizations by certain countries. And this is, of course, an organization fact. It's not linked to the individual proposal. And indeed, our aim is to make this part of the organization's data so that we don't have to come back repeatedly and ask it at the level of each proposal. So, point taken, we are working on this.
Very good. Then the next one is that the amendment processes are often too lengthy. How could the European Commission streamline the process and reduce the administrative burden for the coordinator? Well, the first question is are amendments really that complicated? I was under the impression that we have tried and simplify this, but I've also heard from our panel that they found amendments to be complicated. Now, what makes amendment complicated and how could that be simplified? Let's maybe translate this as a question for our panel. Theodore,
I probably will step in and kind of like expand this question a little bit, because ASPACT is increased load on coordinators. And I think in general, I would like to really circle back a little bit. Many people today said that coordinators, they get too much work already. And many of like excellent scientists here on the panel, they said, we don't want to be coordinators. So look what's happening, that the best scientists, they don't want to be coordinators, right? So that means we are almost like creating the system which doesn't promote like the best to lead with the best ideas and experience, And this is not a great system. And then there is all this workload, and amendments is only one bit of this additional work that coordinators will need to do, because yeah, amendments actually coordinator actually talk to a PO, right? So and I think this is probably like there should be something done about this. And what I've seen also in some consortia, there are absolutely amazing coordinators, and they get funding pretty much similar to other like individual partners. And this absolutely doesn't reflect the reality. So, and they don't want to get more funding because they kind of feel that, you know, I don't want to be my project. And it's great, of course, but so the question is like, how can this can be changed so that coordinators, they will be more rewarded, and they will actually have also more power in the project so that they actually can change and amend the project themselves, and not only formally with kind of all these sort of rules and so on, and it's power of the budget, it's also power of the science, because they always feel that they change any little bit there and they will get actually pushback from POs and formals and reviewers and so on. I would like to bring this as kind of like big question also to the panel.
Yeah, Jan, I think, was still raising his hand. Or...
Yes, I think there's a huge one thing which is always underestimated by the opposite side, so by you guys in comparison to us scientists, that an amendment actually introduces for a scientist a huge psychological cost, since we have directly now to integrate this into our project, replanning, doing, and so on, and it takes so many cycles away. So I've only done amendments myself when I was the single PI in the project, but for 3 projects, and it takes so many cycles out that I'm losing, I think, several days over it, despite that this should be just one phone call frequently. If you could do this through a less like if you could, or if it would be one small conversation if we could have done this during the negotiations. And so I think that's a huge part. And you shouldn't forget, we scientists, we're very well, there's a reason why we're in science, and that is that we typically are very hesitant to do any risk when it comes to organizational things. So when we ask for something to be changed, then this has cost us a lot of effort, much more than somebody who, you know, comes from administration and basically feels, okay, this is a normal thing to do, or from management and who thinks this is a normal thing to do. So for us, there's a huge personal cost involved to do this, to do an amendment.
Thanks for that. I mean, I don't pretend that I now really fully understand what makes it technically really difficult, but
maybe that we are nerds.
That we can maybe also follow up. And Anna would like to come in.
Yes, just very shortly to reflect on the power of coordination. So I was like I witnessed some projects, and I was part of them when the one partner bankrupt or was not performing, and there was a really problem for the project to go on. And then for the project I'm coordinating, we decided to have in the consortium agreement, so not in the grant agreement, but in consortium agreement, more detailed rules regarding internal reporting. So for example, we have every 6 months, we have internal reporting regarding financial and scientific progress, and this depends on the payment we are providing as coordinators. So it seems then this is extra loading for the consortium, but in fact it's not, because this is really helpful for the reporting, for the the periodic reporting we have to provide for the commission. So, and then this somehow is like, giving you a bit of power to and encourage partners to provide the feedback and to perform, and then you have the 6 months control and then overview what is going on. So I think these measures can be also implemented in the consortium agreement, when you can have the more detailed rules how you will be coordinating the partners.
Thanks very much. For me, that reflects that we have 2 sides here. It's not only how the system is organized by the Commission on our side and what the conditions are, and how the IT tools work and how the POs behave, but there's also a question, of course, to get agreement inside the consortium on what you actually want. So I think once you are at that stage that the consortium knows exactly what the change is they want, I would imagine a big part of the problem has already been solved. I guess you also know that there are many, many things where you don't need a formal amendment and you can just report on them in your technical report. And as the technical report is accepted, that change is also accepted. You have a section that's called deviation in that technical report. If you justify deviation there, that is in many cases good enough to go ahead. But I guess we can still go to a couple of more questions. Thanks very much. Peter.
Yes, all agencies should work according to the same rules. For instance, what they request from us in the reports to describe or justify deviations. Yes, we fully subscribe to this principle. Easily said, not so easily done. We have, of course, common rules. We have one single model grant agreement. We have one single annotated grant agreement. We have an internal repository of the rules and processes that everybody has to follow. But still, there might be here and there practices that are happening differently in the different executive agencies. We hear this from time to time. Our request is always, please be specific and tell us the concrete case, because without having concrete cases, we at the coordinating level cannot do very much. So having a so to say, default statement saying they are all doing it differently does not help.
If I'm not mistaken, you have the possibility to report such cases also formally through the Research Inquiry Service. There is one category, if you go to the Research Inquiry Service, that is called something like, I don't know, implementation that deviates from the principles or rules or conditions, something like that. I don't know the exact title, but you will find it if you go to the Research Inquiry Service. There you can then say where you believe the PO or the service managing your grant has treated it in a way that isn't appropriate or actually even goes against the principles and rules that you find published. So I encourage you also to do that, because indeed I believe it's quite useful to have those cases put on the table. I think the same principle that Jan mentioned before for other things, like as soon as it's actually out there and in the open. And I can also reassure you, I don't think there is a risk involved in reporting those things. I don't really think that there would be any repercussions, neither for the person reporting it nor for the organization involved in it. That is, I think, really nothing to be afraid of if all of this is reasonably communicated. So thanks for that. Next question. A simplification would be to connect the GEP, that is the Gender Equality Plan or Green Charter statements, to the PIC of an organization. Again, that's the principle of bringing organization level information to the organization and not project specific. These don't need to be asked for each proposal. I think we agree with the principle. Yes. Peter has mentioned the same for other organizational level information before. I think we are exploring this. I'm not sure, Peter, if you want to add anything.
Maybe, yes, you mentioned that we are about to do this for the ownership and control assessment. We are also doing it for the gender equality plan. I personally was not aware even of the Green Charter statements, but point taken. There was a general statement at the beginning from one of the panelists that we try to go for this once only principle. I had asked myself, where do we still deviate from the once only principle? Now we have a few examples that you mentioned. If you are aware of other examples where we ask repeatedly for the same information, and that could be stored somewhere centrally, please put this also in the Slido. Even if we don't go through all the questions here now in the meeting, we will of course look through all the suggestions that have reached us. And if we have a complete collection of these cases where we ask repeatedly for the same information, we will go ahead and follow this up. Thanks a lot.
And maybe we could even, Peter, if you agree, keep Slido open a little bit after the meeting in case you have some more ideas, in case you you keep thinking and you have more points, you discover more points, you can still enter them. We are indeed going to go through all Slido comments while we all realize we cannot go through all here in the meeting. Next point, please. That is from TU Delft, the suggestion to keep separate research innovation actions and innovation action type of instruments and not combine them. I maybe should say that in the Commission proposal for the next Horizon Europe from 2028, there is the proposal to merge them. Right, I take this, I listen. I'm not sure if anybody in our panel has any particular views on whether we need, how much are you familiar with the different types of actions, research, innovation actions and innovation actions, and is it important to have those to continue as separate types of grants? Yeah, that's of course a rather special point. So of course for us it would be interesting to know why that would need to stay as two separate types of action and cannot be combined.
I think the second part of the contribution gives kind of a justification, but I would not buy this 100% because the TRL level can also be specified at the topic description. So even if the type of action is the same for a given topic, we can specify which kind of scale of TRL we want to address there. So that would be not an argument for me to split them. I see Anna wants to.
Yes.
Yeah, yes, just for my understanding, so research and innovation action are on the lower TLR and innovation are on the higher, and then it's usually in the calls are required more about the business plan and this feasibility for the future uptake. So this is the difference. It is in the project, but it's also not clear why they should be combined or not combined. It's like so this I cannot comment, but from the perspective of writing that project is that the difference is just in the more market-oriented approach for the innovation actions, and also the funding schemes for some partners, because I think industrial partners are having the lower contribution in such can be founded at the lower percentage. And Jan would like to continue, I think.
I think there may be a point which the person asking the question didn't say, but in Germany with the BM Future, BMBF, or whatever it's called at the moment, we have had the problem of mission creep, that basically the higher TRL projects, because they were in the same pool with the lower TRL projects, have kind of pushed the lower TRL projects into a margin. And that's why an explicitly different label can actually be quite healthy for the Commission. And I think that's, I would imagine that that's the argument behind the question. And I think it's a good argument.
Right. Of course, this then depends on the mix of all grants and all instruments that are going to go forward. If that's the point, to make sure that there is sufficient funding space for low TRL projects, that is, I think, a question we cannot really address now, because that depends not only on whether these two are combined, but what happens with the rest as well. Next suggestion. This is for you, I think.
Okay, make the topic descriptions in Pillar 2 less specific and don't ask for everything. This leads to big consortia that are hard to manage. Small consortia are easier. Yes, we heard this also from the panel repeatedly, that big consortia can be difficult to manage, and there might be also a difference in quality of the partners, which makes it more difficult to manage these. So, point taken. I don't know whether the panel still wants to comment on this.
Yeah, this is, I think, very much a point that chimes with what we heard a couple of times from the panel. So I would normally expect that people nod to this. And I think, yeah, that is also something that the Commission has heard a couple of times and may also be reflected in our commitment to go indeed for less prescriptive calls. We've heard that from our Commissioner also last week in the implementation dialogue. That is a commitment we've made. Maybe with this, it's 12 o'clock. I think we've had a very exciting and nice discussion. I hope to discover many more interesting points in the Slido comments as we go through them after the meeting. Thanks so much to our 5 panelists. That was really a pleasure to have you and have your voices from the pulse of the projects. We are at the end. I think this was a nice format, and I hope we can repeat it in this or a similar way in the future. With this, I would like to close the meeting. Thank you all, and thanks again for your input.